Step right up, ladies and gents. You've turned into the hottest spot on the wireless, where the jazz is smooth and the chatter snappy. And yours truly is here to spin a tale or two. So grab your seat or a cuppa, and let's make a little magic on the air tonight. Now, tonight we are doing I guess, 1 hour stream or broadcast, whichever you want to call it, just to make up for my missing broadcast from last week. Now, not to dilly-dally too long, we're just gonna jump right into it. And yeah, let's just jump right into it and get right to the scares. First, we are gonna start off with, let me look through my papers. I got a bunch of them today. Looks like I got about 4 ghost stories. Well, I got 2 UFO sightings and 2 stalker ones? Yes, 2 creepy stalker ones. So we're going to start off with the 4 ghost ones. And this one's just called Archivist's Warning. Archivist? I think I'm saying that right. I took the job because I needed the money. The listing said, archival assistant. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but do bear with me. And it was only 2 nights a week, Thursdays and Saturdays, from 8 to 3 a.m. Strange hours, sure, but it paid well, and the ad said, quiet work environment. That suited me just fine. The building was older than I expected. It wasn't some dusty library. It was a gray block of a structure hidden behind 2 rows of overgrown hedges. It had that damp stone smell and walls thick enough that you couldn't hear anything outside once that heavy front door was sealed behind you. My instructions were clear. Log newly discovered documents, catalog photographs, and never, under any circumstances, open anything sealed with red wax. Easy, right? The man who gave me the tour, Mr. Hendricks, that name sounds very familiar for some reason, was an old, polite, and nervous sort. He kept glancing over his shoulder and touched the edges of the locked filing cabinets like they were sacred objects. He handed me an index card out on my first shift. If you hear the drawer open on its own, don't look, don't move, don't breathe. I thought he was joking, but the tone in his voice was flat and scared. Yeah, of course I probably should have done that first and made it sound like that, but oh well. He looked like someone who hasn't slept in years. Don't we all? The first night went smoothly. The second too. I started thinking maybe the place had a reputation it didn't deserve. Just an old building with a weird owner. Then came Saturday night. It started with the photos I was digitalizing, a collection of World War I portraits when I came across an image labeled Unidentified Visitor 1917. The figure in the photo didn't fit. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just a black collarless coat. His face was pale, his features blurred like an exposure had gone wrong. No eyes, just dark indentations. I looked at the back, nothing except a smear of red wax in the corner. I put it aside. I wasn't about to break the wax seal rule. There we go. Even if this one was already broken. Maybe it didn't count? At midnight, the drawer opened. The metal squealed. I spun around. A file drawer in the far wall, long and deep, slid out slowly. Inside it, nothing. But I couldn't move. I remember the card, so I stood still for what felt like 10 minutes. Then the drawer slammed shut. I could move again. I left early that night, and when I returned, the photo was gone. And in its place was another picture of me, sitting in the archive room, taken from behind. Now, that was a pretty spooky story. Not as much as we read in the past, but it was still pretty spooky on its own. Though, was hoping for a little more to it, but that's just me. But it's all right. Anyway, also just to keep in mind, all these have so far been anonymous. I have no idea who's who or who these belong to. The next story is called Room 304. Don't know why, but I guess we're about to find out. I had a habit of staying in old hotels. Not the kind you find in big cities, but the mom and pop style places on the state highways. They were cheaper, had more character, and usually didn't care if you paid in cash. The last one I stayed at before, I swore off them was in northern Arizona. It didn't have a name, just a sign that read motel in flickering red neon. A single floor, 10 rooms, and a skeleton key for each one. The woman at the front desk warned me. You can take any room except 304. Looked down at the key she gave me. Room 304. I said, "You just said..." She shook her head quickly. I said you can take any room but 304. You're holding 103. I swear I saw 304. But when I looked again, it was 103. I stayed the night, and I figured maybe I was overtired, jet lagged, and I'd driven nearly 9 hours that day. At 2:45, I woke up. The hallway was empty, but my door was open. Key still in the lock. And I thought maybe I had shut it all the way, but something told me to check the hallway. Room 304 didn't exist. There's no door with that number. Just 301 through 303. And then a utility closet. I knocked, of course, but no response. I tried the handle. Locked. When I turned around and the hallway lights began to flicker. Starting from the far end and coming toward me as if something was moving beneath them, causing each bulb to die as it passed. I ran back to my room and slammed the door. In the morning, I asked the woman again, "Why can't people stay in 304? And she sighed and said, "Because anyone who dares is never found again." I told her there was no 304. She handed me an old photo, yellowed and creased. A motel in the 70s, 10 rooms, a clear, bold number 304 at the end. She whispered, "It used to be there, and now it's not." And that was the end of that one. That one was a little creepier, but not enough to tickle my fancy, because that could have just been like one of those situations where you have to have a set number of rooms, but only can have a certain room because of superstition. That does not exist. Like how some skyscrapers have those. I forget which floor it is, but I think it was floor 13. You can't have a floor 13 in your skyscrapers or something like that. I don't know how true that is, but Who knows? But let's get right on to the. Well, no. Do I have any more I gotta say to this? No. No. I don't. Nobody in the studio has any other thoughts either. All right. Let's jump right into the next one. This one I do find a little interesting because it takes place at a theater, and it's called The Theater That Clapped. There's a tiny theater on the outskirts of the town I grew up in, closed for decades. It's a beautiful building, gold trim, velvet curtains, seats that creak when you shift. It used to host plays, operas, even silent films. It's been abandoned since 1972. A fire took out most of the stage, and the balcony collapsed. No one was hurt, supposedly, but the doors were chained up ever since. Until my friend Maya dared us to go inside one night, just for the thrill. There were 5 of us. We snuck in through a broken back door and found the place eerily intact, dust everywhere, but otherwise untouched. The air was stale, thick with mold and age, but the really odd part, it sounded like there was a play going on. Whispers from the stage, coughs from empty seats, a single piano key being pressed over and over. We laughed it off at first, then came the applause. It started off soft, but grew louder and louder as time went on, and it came from all around us, like the theater was packed, clapping hands and rising cheers. But no one was there, no shadows, no people, just endless clapping. We ran as we pushed through the double doors. I looked back one last time, and I saw them. Silhouettes seated in every chair, hands raised mid applause. No faces, just shape and movement. I never went back after that, but my friend Maya did. Since then, she's been gone for 2 weeks. Now, that actually did give me some chills. I don't know if it's because of her friend disappearing, or just because it is the idea of this being found, having silhouettes found, and not knowing exactly what they are, and just the applause that you hear throughout the empty theater. Now that would honestly freak me out. Also the rising cheers and single piano note playing, but other than that, that's actually not as creepy as I was. Like, it was creepy. It gave me chills, but it wasn't as creepy as I was expecting it to be. But that's fine. That's fine. Anyways, let's see what we have next before we go on a little break. Because I was hoping, because of how fast I'm reading these, it seems they are. I'm gonna have to need a lot more. I'm gonna have to get a lot more stories to continue on long periods. Because an hour, I don't think I'm gonna reach an hour. The broadcast has only been going on for 16 minutes, which is surprising. Anyways, the lighthouse logs. My uncle was a lighthouse keeper on the Maine coast. He lived alone for 20 years, tending the lights and recording daily notes in thick logbooks. But after he passed, we inherited everything, including the logs. Of course, my curiosity got the best of me when I got hold of them, and I started reading them. At first, they were normal: weather updates, ship sightings, storm warnings, the usual that you'd think you'd find in something like these types of logs that I guess they used during being as a lighthouse keeper. But the one entry stood out. Dated March 14th, 1998. He was at the rocks again. Pale face, long limbs, doesn't speak, doesn't move unless I blink. Almost got inside last night. After that, the entries grew frantic. He whispers at the windows now. I locked the cellar door. I don't remember building a cellar door. 3 knocks, 1 for each step up the tower. Climb slowly. Lights out. I didn't shut it off. There's a final entry dated 3 days before my uncle's death. He's in the lighthouse now, standing inside it. I can see him at the top of the beam when it spins. I think he's looking for someone else now. I closed the law book, and that night I dreamed of the lighthouse, and of a figure made of shadows standing in the beam, head slowly turning. When I woke up and checked the logbook again, pages were blank. All of them. Now, that actually was kind of creepy just because of the logbook style and the entries that's within it. I don't know why, but I've always found lighthouses creepy. Probably because of how isolated they are, or, you know, how dangerous, I guess is the word I'm thinking, how dangerous it can be, since you're just sitting out there and you're just watching. You don't know when when storms do come, the roaring of the waves as they slam against the rocks, and even probably the lighthouse itself. I don't know how anybody does it, but I'm glad I get stuck in the studio instead of being top of the lighthouse, messing with the lights and watching out for ships and stuff, because I would not survive such a thing. Sorry if I'm having to take a lot of stops to drink. I have had some serious sickening allergies out here. Anyways. I'm making sure with my crew that if it's alright if we take a break or we continue. But they are gesturing for me to take the break. So I think I will listen to this. Yeah, okay. I'm taking one last look at the things I have. I have the other stories I have, and I know where I am. I'm gonna start here. So, yes. So I'm gonna take the suggestion of my crew, is it crew? I think it's crew is the word I'm thinking of. Oh well. So, we're gonna take a quick break. So hold on the phone, folks. We're taking a quick breather to let the old ticker catch up. Don't go flapping off. I'll be back on air faster than you can say the bees knees. and Gittens, the brakes over, and the heap cat's back in the driver's seat. Tune those dials, cause the Mats. Okay, whoever made this script is gonna really need to learn that I don't understand half of this. Alright, that messed me up. Alright, we are back to some more creepy stories from the shadows. Now, let me find, because I need to make sure while on break, I was actually going over a few things real quick. But I do remember where I was, so don't get your panties in a twist and whatnots. Alright, so next two stories we're going to start off with is about something new, because I don't think I've ever done anything to do with this type, but they're creepy stalkers. So, the first story is called The Man in the Yellow Hoodie. Now, of course, the yellow hoodie just makes me remember of a film that I watched back in the day. I live in a mid-sized town, not small enough where everyone knows each other, but small enough that strange occurrences tend to stand out. A couple of years ago, I started noticing a man in a yellow hoodie around my neighborhood. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe he was just a jogger, but then I realized he never really seemed to actually be jogging. The first time I saw him, it was late afternoon. I was walking home from a grocery store, and there he was leaning against the lamppost 2 streets away from my apartment. His hood was up, hands in his pocket, head tilted slightly down like he was staring at the ground. I walked past him quickly, thinking nothing of it, until I glanced back and saw him turn in my direction. The second time was a week later. It was a cloudy evening, and I'd taken the long way home. As I turned the corner near a small park, I saw the yellow hoodie again. This time he was sitting on the bench facing the playground. No kids were around, no one else was in sight, and again, he just sat there. I slowed down, pretending to check my phone, and when I looked up, his head had turned. He was now looking at me. By the third time, I was starting to feel unnerved. I was taking out my trash one night when I saw him across the street, half hidden in the shadow of a building. His hood was up, his face just barely visible in the dim light of a flickering street lamp. That is very cliche, though. He didn't move and didn't say anything. I told a friend about it, but they just laughed it off and said it was probably some guy who lived nearby. I just wanted to believe that, until the night I saw him outside my apartment window. It was around 1 a.m., and I was reading in my living room. My blinds were half open, and out of the corner of my eye I caught movement. I turned toward the window, and I saw him, standing on the sidewalk facing my building. The yellow hoodie, the same tilt of the head. I froze. Then he slowly lifted his hand and waved. Not a friendly wave, just a slow wave. Though it was creepy nonetheless, but like he wanted me to know he saw me. Right? He knew I was watching. When I grabbed my phone to call the police and I looked back, he was already gone. I never saw him again after that, but to this day, I keep my blinds closed at night. And I would totally agree with you on that. You should. Now, these are actually just plain creepy all on its own, because the fact is that these aren't supernatural or mystics or, otherworldly shadows from the dark. These are actual people out here like that, and they are dangerous. You should not mess around with those type of people, especially if they're stalking you in particular. But since it seemed like this person never followed it up and let us know if it happened again, I'm assuming they're fine. But I will keep my hopes up on that one. Now, we got a second one. Now, Now, this one does kind of give me more of a creepy feel. Well, probably not as creepy because the last one was more personal because it is at their house. This one is a parking garage shadow. Which I don't know why I named it that, but oh well. This happened last year when I was working late shifts downtown. My office was in a high rise, and the parking garage I used was a block away. Most nights I'd leave around 10 or 11 p.m. and the walk was uneventful until one Tuesday night. It had been raining earlier, so the streets were damp and the lights reflected off the puddles. I left the building and started walking toward the garage, my footsteps echoing against the empty sidewalk. As I turned the corner, I noticed a man standing under the overhang of a closed shop. He was tall, thin, wearing a black jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He didn't look at me as I passed, but the moment I went by, I heard footsteps behind me. I sped up slightly, and the footsteps sped up too. By the time I reached the garage, my nerves were buzzing. I swiped my access card, stepped inside, and started climbing the stairs to my car. The stairwell smelled faintly like of oil and damp concrete. My footsteps echoed, but so did another set. Just the floor below me. I tried to tell myself it was just another late worker heading to their car, but every time I stopped, the other footsteps stopped too. By the time I reached the 5th floor, my heart was pounding out of my chest. My car was parked near the far end, and I could see it from the stairwell too. I walked briskly toward it, trying not to look over my shoulder. Then I heard the door to the stairway slam open behind me, and the footsteps got faster. I yanked my keys out from my bag, unlocked my car, and jumped inside, locking the doors. A second later, a figure passed in front of my headlights, tall, thin, baseball cap low over his face. He didn't try to open my door, and didn't say a word. Just stopped, turned his head toward me, and stood there for a moment. Then he walked toward the opposite end of the garage, disappearing out of my sight. I waited several minutes before starting my car, and when I drove out, I looked for him, but he was gone. I started parking somewhere else after that. And since then, I haven't seen this guy anywhere. Now, okay, I take that back. Even though it was creepy, the first story before this one was creepy because of the whole, knowing where you live thing. But it's the fact that this person seemed to have been chased all the way to their car, or followed at least, and then some pursued. That was just beyond creepy. I don't know how I could handle going through something like that. I'm glad I don't. Okay. We're down to the last two, and it is seeming to be that we are probably not going to make the hour mark, but I really need to start reminding myself to find more stories for our special. But anyways, we will see what we can do, and if we do reach the end of the second story much quicker than I expect, we will just end the broadcast there. Alright, let's jump right into it. Now, these ones are UFO sightings this time. Now, probably not going to be as creepy because UFO sightings aren't really, as creepy. Now, this one seems to be about someone else and not them. So, this one's going to be a little interesting. The name of the title of the story is called The Lights Over Dry Creek. Dry Creek, Nevada was the kind of place where the desert swallowed sound. Nights were so quiet you could hear the wind scrape just across the hard pan. And when the sky was clear, the stars looked close enough to touch. Now, I would love to see a site like that. Don't get me wrong, I would totally pay to go see that. Elise Trent lived just outside town on a small ranch with nothing but sagebrush and barbed wire for miles. It was late September when he noticed the first light. It came one night while he was checking on the cattle. A pulsing whitish blue glow low on the horizon, not far above the ridge that bordered his land. At first he thought it might be a crop duster or maybe even one of the rare low-flying jets from Nellis Air Force Base. But the light didn't move like any aircraft he knew. It drifted horizontally for a few seconds, and froze dead still. And then without warning, it shot straight upward, stopped again, and started blinking into an irregular pattern. The hairs on Elise's, I'm probably pronouncing this name wrong, I'm just gonna call it Ellis, stood on end. He wasn't the kind to scare easily. Vietnam had cured him of that. But this light was different than what he's ever seen. The air seemed charged like before a thunderstorm, except there was no clouds in the sky in sight. His cattle were restless, hurtling near the fence line, their low moos carrying in the stillness. The light suddenly split into 3 smaller lights, each one moving in its own direction before rejoining again, as if playing some slow-motion game in the sky. Ellis could feel his heartbeat in his ears. He went back inside and grabbed his binoculars and stepped back out onto the porch. Through the lenses, the lights wasn't a solid sphere, but seemed to shimmer, almost like it was made of shifting plates or panels that caught the starlight differently as it moved. He thought he could see a faint shape behind the glow, a dark triangular shadow blocking out the stars. Then came the sound. A low hum, deep enough to vibrate his chest, building until it seemed to pulse through the ground beneath his boots. His dogs, who usually barked at anything that moved, were silent, tails between their legs. The object began drifting towards his ranch, growing larger. Ellis backed toward the door, his eyes fixed on the thing. He stopped about 100 yards from his house, hovering maybe 50 feet off the ground, and there was no wind, but he could feel a pressure in the air, as if the atmosphere itself had thickened. A shaft of pale green light descended from the craft, sweeping across the ground. When it passed over the corral, the cattle froze mid-motion, utterly still. And of course, I would say that is a pun, very cheap pun, though. Utterly still like statues. The beam lingered for a moment, then flickered off. The hum faded to silence, and then without acceleration, without any transition at all, the object shot straight upward into the stars and was gone. The cattle began to move again as if nothing happened. Ellis stood in the dark for a long time, the night suddenly feeling much bigger than it had before. He never told the local sheriff, and just marked it in his own mind as one of those things he'd never be able to explain. Now, again, like I said earlier before reading, these type of stories aren't really too overly creepy to me. I do enjoy them. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy them. They're just not overly creepy. They do have that kind of sense of mystery and curiosity that I would love to probably see one of these things one of these days. But we all know that that's a rare occasion and feels like it's too coincidental the locations where you see them. Alright, on to the last one, folks. And this one seems a decently sized one, but again, it already is looking like we're not going to make it to the hour mark. I will make sure to write down a list of, I need to add a lot more than just 8, because we have almost gone through 8 stories already tonight and still haven't made an hour. So let's say probably 8 plus 4, maybe 6 more. That'd probably make me an hour. Alright, jumping right into it. This one is called The Highway Encounter. And and it looks like from again, it's for someone else, not the person telling this. Well, it's not the person that sent me the story. On an empty stretch of Highway 64 in New Mexico, Frank Delgado, why does that name sound familiar? And his sister Marlene were making the long nighttime drive back from a family reunion in Teos. Oh, I know I pronounced that wrong. It was close to midnight. The desert on either side of the road, just endless moonlit sea of sage and sand. Marlene was dozing in the passenger seat when Frank noticed a strange light in the rear view mirror. Oh my God, my English. It was far off at first, just a single white orb, but it was moving toward them faster than any car should be able to. Someone's really flying tonight, Frank muttered, expecting to be overtaken any second, but the light didn't resolve into headlights. Instead, it stayed a single, brilliant sphere that glowed without glare, almost as if it was emitting a soft halo rather than casting a beam. When it reached them, it didn't pass, but floated upward, pulling alongside the car, but well above the asphalt, keeping pace perfectly. Marlene stirred awake and saw the light and gasped. Frank slowed down, and the light matched his speed exactly. He sped up. Same thing. It was silent. No sound of rotors or engines, and it seemed to tilt slightly, as if it was observing them. The sphere then zipped ahead in a blur, stopping maybe 100 yards down the road. As they approached, the light dimmed, revealing an outline. A flat disc-like shape with a dark metallic sheen. Along its rim, a series of small amber lights blinked in sequence, moving around the craft like a rotating marquee. They passed directly under it. Frank craned his neck to look upward and felt a wave of dizziness, as if the air inside the car had grown heavier. The dashboard clock flickered, and the radio light let out a burst of static before going dead. Not my doing. The craft kept pace just ahead for another mile before abruptly shooting off to the night sky at a sharp angle, leaving only the stars and dark highway. When the radio came back on, the clock was 5 minutes ahead, but both of them swore it only been seconds. Neither Frank nor Marlene spoke much for the rest of the drive, but in the weeks after, both started having the same recurring dream. Standing in a featureless white room with the sound of distant footsteps circling just out of sight. Now, I will say that was an interesting way of ending it. Was not expecting them to end it that way. But I have to say that was very interesting and very mysterious. It was creepy. It did give a lot more detail than the last one, which I appreciate because now it kind of makes me imagine it a little bit more, and I hope it helps you imagine and put together the image into your own minds. See what this might have looked like to you if you saw such a thing. That's all I have to say on that. These stories were all pretty interesting, especially the stalker one, since that was pretty new to the broadcast, because I've never actually done anything with that before, or even had these types of stories. I'm glad I got them, but they were probably the creepiest I've had so far. But that is gonna be it. I have still decent amount of time, about 15 minutes left, but with nothing else, and I don't actually have anything really else to talk about because I don't have any. I didn't have any other extra stories ready to talk about. So we're going to end it here. My team is also kind of just telling me to wrap it up. So that's all the shebang for tonight, folks. Keep your chins up, your jazz hot, and your radio's turned for the next swell shindig. Till then, keep it capiche, see?
Just 7.